Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Life Burst, a Wixoss podcast. We're doing the Life Burst mini today, and we're going to be talking about Uchu no Hajimari. Say it with me, guys. Uchu no Hajimari. What does that stand? It stands Universe's Beginning. It's one of the only teams that, for some reason, isn't in English, is definitely still in the Japanese. So just get used to it. I like to, if you can't, guys, I like to call it Uchu. I think it's kind of a fun, cute name for it. If you don't like that, you can always say Eggy Sensei because Tamago stands for egg. So I don't know why it's Dr. Egg, but if you look at her art, you see the egg and you go, oh, that is definitely an egg. This is my favorite deck, guys. This is the one that I personally like. Mostly because I'm not actually all much of a control player, but I do like punk bands and I do like Halloween-esque kind of aesthetics, and this has both of them, so I'm entrenched. Currently, there's really only one way to play this type of deck. In the future, there'll be a little bit of variation. It's all going to be under the umbrella of control. So if you guys are here to find out how Uchu no Hajimari works, how to build it, how to deck construct it, how to have different options for it, how to swap things out for your meta, how's it doing in Japan that are 1 year ahead of us in the meta. I'm here to answer all those questions for you. I've done a lot of research on this deck. It is one of my personal favorites, and last week I did get first place with it. I just want to flex a little bit there. So this is the deck that on your screen, I actually used to get first place at that tournament. Does it have holes? Absolutely. I can't wait for set 2 to show up and fill some of those holes. I actually can't wait for set 3 because I like Nova better as a center. But right now, the only center we have currently available is Dr. Tamago. So we're going to talk about how to construct the Dr. Tamago deck. Now, Dr. Tamago is, in essence, a hand control deck. If that sounds weird to you because you're coming from different card games, yes, it is strange, especially in Wixoss, where you are actually drawing 2 cards a turn, and there's so many different sources of being able to draw extra cards for enter across the variety of colors that hand control isn't quite as strong as you think it would be in this, and it's not. Realistically, at the end of the day, calling it a hand control deck is a little bit of a disservice to it. It's a resource control deck. You are trying to control what your opponent can play, control how much resources your opponents have at any point in time. That includes their enter, as well as what's in their hand, how many guards they have as well, and even to the point of sometimes what's on the top of their library. So, with that in mind, it is a true control deck. But if you're coming from Magic the Gathering or a different type of card game, you might be kind of off-put. How is it a control deck where, if you look at the deck list, there's very few removal in this deck list, and the fact is it stalls. That's why I made the name of the deck Dr. Tamago Stall. Your goal is to get to turn 8. Bear in mind, this is a game that usually ends on turn 4. So your goal is to really extend this game out far past its normal points. It gets a little faster, I should say, in set 2 and in set 3, where you can kind of keep pace, but it stays true to the fact that it's still a resource control deck. Now, when we're talking about how it's a resource control deck, the best way to explain this is to talk about, it's twofold. We'll talk about walls in a second, but we should talk about Dr. Tamago. Never give up, Dr. Tamago. Level 3, costs 2 to grow. Its an enter ability, its team enter ability, is you get to draw a card, the opponent has to discard a card. By the time that we get to around turn 3 where you're doing this, you're dropping the opponent to probably 3 cards in hand when this is happening. So it's not, it's incidental. The more and more you get in there, the better it is for you. Then you have the ability to, whenever this L-Rig attacks, if there's 5 or more cards underneath it, draw a card. If there's 7 or more cards underneath it, then your opponent discards a card. It's not at random. It's just their choice of discarding a card. You have a once-a-game ability. It's free. You put all the cards underneath your other L-Rigs under this L-Rig. The best way to explain that, in my opinion, is calling it a Kirby. You Kirby them all up together. You only have your level 2s on the top now. You have 5 to 7 cards underneath your Dr. Tamagos, and that includes the level 0s. And you now have the ability to make your opponent discard constantly, which is going to help you because you're going to make them discard guards. Now, it's worth mentioning that because of this ability, you're going to want to race to getting all of your assists fully leveled up as soon as possible, which is a little bit at odds from what the deck wants to do. The deck wants to stall, but it wants to use all of its assist level ups, all of its assist grows immediately as soon as possible. So it has a little bit of tension there. The other thing that we're going to want to point out to talk about what this deck does is its piece. Hapani, I think it's a Hanpani. Guys, I'm bad at Japanese. Hapani Destruction is what I've always called it. Hapani Destruction. You just need to have the team in order to really pull it off. Whenever this L-Rig attacks, and that's going to talk about your level 3 Tamago, you have the ability to do X amount. This X is what level the opponent's L-Rig is at. Usually that's 3. You can make the opponent discard a card. You can draw a card. Inevitably, your goal is to be like, when I'm attacking with this, how do I get their hand size down to 0? And anything extra, I'll draw cards with. Unless you're afraid to deck, in which case you can say, you can discard 3, and they go like, I have 1 card in hand. You're like, yep, you can discard 3. I've done that before. Realistically, your goal is to make the opponent's hand go to 0 unless you're playing a super, super long game and you need the resources, in which case you draw cards. Every game is going to go sort of this way. So I think this pairing of assists to go with your main center L-Rig is the best way to go. And that is going to be with Bang. Oh gosh, here we go. I gotta pull it out of my L-Rig deck again. You can hear the cards. Bang Crescendo, Bang Da Capo. You certainly have other Bang choices. I would not say that Bang Repeat is bad. It does let you draw a card and lets you vanish, so you get a little bit of lane opening. I do not like Bang Big Bang. It's got cool artwork. It's got an awesome name. 7 enter is so much, and you'll never be able to do it in time to get your once a game ability from your center off. So it's just not worth it. Bang Crescendo will get you some enter, and realistically, you can't really ask for anything else from a level 1. I actually kind of hate all of other Bang's level 1s, so I just prefer going with that one. Nova Slash, letting you basically super hand fix, lets you dig at the top 7 cards of your library. Find white and find blue Signy, put them in your hand. Lets you really sculpt out your hand and figure out what you want to be doing. You're missing level 1s. Cool. Grab your level 1s. You need some dual colored enter. Great. Grab the dual colored enter. If you need to you need your late game Fenrir's. Cool. Grab your late game Fenrir's. This deck currently has Bradamentes. So if you got a way to freeze, cool. Do a turn 1 Bradamente and watch everyone be really sad as they lose one of their things. It goes to trash and they have to discard a card. It's very discouraging. Also not very good, but pretty discouraging. And outside of Nova Dirty, which does that draw, you have Nova Slash or Nova... Oh, what is it called? Supernova? Supernova. Nova Slash is what I prefer. It's cheaper, and it's defensive, and I like that. I think you need to use Nova Slash because you want to be activating your center's ability as soon as possible when you can. But it is not a terrible idea to do Nova Supernova, as that will inevitably take your opponent by surprise and get probably anywhere from 2 to 4 life bursts or life cloth crush on the opponent's side. If I was going to go into Supernova territory, which I have before, by the way, and gotten good results with it, I would also be running some weirder Signy, which we'll talk about, that are more tempo-oriented and less control-oriented, because I'm trying to swing the game at that point into my win con. And you should note that when you're tossing, there is, in fact, a pretty good combo here. When you toss 3 Signy back into your opponent's hand with Supernova, you can make them discard it immediately with Happening Destruction. So it's got a combo there built into the deck if you wanted to go down that route. We talked about the centers. We talked about the L-rigs. We talked about the assists. We talked about one cool team piece. What are we going to talk about next? We're going to talk about your secondary piece that you can do. I feel like a broken record every time I say that Kirakirum is a good auto-include if you have it as your second piece. Getting a little bit of enter, getting a surprise draw, getting yourself closer to getting guards, and being able to use all of your assists, especially when you want your assists to go under your center as soon as possible, is not a terrible option. If you weren't going to do that option, what would you use? And my opinion is to use Great Reversal. I've actually leaned more and more towards Great Reversal. There's someone in my meta who also plays Dr. Tamago, who I really, really respect in terms of deck building. It was his idea. I played it once or twice. I hate playing Great Reversal, but I can't deny what he said is true. This deck lacks a good way to end the game, and Great Reversal is an okay way to end the game. Great Reversal is a 5 enter cost piece. That's so much. And basically trashes to frozen Signy, so it lane clears. It doesn't give them the enter, and enter starves them a little bit with that, but it really doesn't matter because you're probably ending the game when you cast it and attack. Is it a good piece? And the answer, in my opinion, is no. But it's an option that ends the game, and the deck sorely needs that. There's another card in here in the main deck that also is like that, called Robin Hood. That is a conceit to that. You'll need to recognize that this deck is great at dirtling, and because it's great at dirtling, it's also one of its weaknesses. Innately, Wixoss is more of an aggressive game. And because Wixoss is more of an aggressive game, dirtling is not a good idea. All it takes is one life burst that says vanish one of your opponent's Signy for you to go, I had this game on lock and now I lost. So keep in mind, you can't dirtle for too long. At some point, you're going to need to put the pressure in, and that's what Great Reversal is all about. It's just putting that pressure in. Innately, you want to use freeze in this deck anyways, and you'll see that the main deck has a lot of different ways to freeze, and that is less to do with the fact that you want to build around freeze. In this scenario, Great Reversal is pretty good because it's just a good way to win the game, and if your Fenrir is going to freeze anyways, you might as well win the game with it. But freeze is not a mechanic to build around. Freeze is a good defensive mechanic, though. When you're looking to stall the game, make it go longer, and try to win a longer game, freeze is great. When you're trying to deprive the opponent of enter, freeze is great. I won't go too into freeze. We'll talk more about it in a future podcast about how freeze is innately a resource denial mechanic and a stall mechanic more than it is a main thing to build your deck around and theme decks around. I've seen a lot of people make that mistake. Freeze in this deck will innately just allow you to make the game go longer. Your goal is going to be not freezing 1. If you can help it, you want to freeze 2. Freezing 2 makes it harder for your opponent to enter charge away the thing you froze. Freezing 2 will allow you to enter starve. And that's innately what you're going to want to do with this deck. With the exception of basically Bradamante and a little bit of the Neon Tetra. See, I knew what the spell was. The little fishy girl. Not really any of your deck is going to get hit by Lancelot or Romel. So you want to freeze in order to try to slow the game down. You're going to want to place your Signy in weird ways to slow the game down. I have had great success with basically looking at their level 1 3000 Signy and putting down my level 2 10,000 Signy, and now I could attack and vanish it, but being like, nope. And then I force them to have to either figure out a way to get rid of my wall, or they have to enter charge from field, or even worse, sacrifice from field and deprive themselves of the enter. Again, my goal is to go long. The easiest way to do that is not give them the resources for them to make it a short game. let's talk about the composition of what's currently on here. Bradamante. I don't like Bradamante. It's a filler. It's there right now because I've got nothing else to do with it. The only time it is fantastic is when you're on the play and you have a Neon Tetra and a Bradamante, and you can play it and freeze one of their things and let it go to trash and then get an incidental discard. It's not very good, but it does the job. In that case, by the way, I usually put the Neon Tetra somewhere in front of a body blocker, basically, and I do not attack with it. And then I put the Bradamante in the open field, so that way they'll kill the Bradamante later, because I really do not care about it. It also has Xiaoyun. I think this is one of the best decks that actually showcase Xiaoyun, because it's a wall, and it's a tiny wall, a level 1 wall, and really, that's all I want, is a tiny level 1 wall so that my game can go longer. If I had more tiny level 1 walls, I'd use them, trust me. Neon Tetra, which has a pretty good life burst effect. It allows you to freeze and down a Signy, I believe. Yeah, down target Signy, freeze a card, and then draw a card. That lets you negate some attacks from the aggressive decks. So, and it also gives you a card in hand then to work with it. I've never really gone lower than 4 cards in hand with this deck. I don't need to add cards that specifically draw cards in here. There's enough incidental card draw that you'll be fine. Then you'll see I've got level 1s in here that are the multicolored. Again, I like that they don't die to Romel. I like that they give me multicolor. I like that I can find them, and with my Nova Mute, or sorry, not Nova Mute, Nova Dirty, and I can draw it as a white card or a blue card. That's the main reason. And of course, you've got your guards in there, your Servant Sharps. Moving on into your level 2s. The level 2s that I roll are pretty defensive. They're walls. They've got the multicolored level 2s. You've got He, short for Helium, who I actually like a lot. Helium has this weird thing where you go like, you put it out there and you go like, go ahead, remove it with a spell or one of your Signy's effects. I don't care. It will down your Elrig, and then your Elrig cannot attack this turn. That falls to Card Jockey. You should remember that Card Jockey can be like, all right, well, my piece allows it to attack when it's down. But it will save you some activations of the opponent's Elrigs. So it's actually pretty okay. The other one that I've got in here is High Circus. High Circus allows you to look at the opponent's top of their library and then decide whether it goes on the bottom or the top. I think this is the only deck that card is good in, because you're in essence grinding their resources down, and inevitably you want to be in a position where late game they are drawing 2 cards, they are playing 2 cards because they do not have the ability to do anything else. They cannot draw extra cards. They're just basically putting the 2 cards down that they draw. Having the ability to control 50% of what they put on the field is insane. And there's nothing more demoralizing than telling them to flip over their top card, looking at it, and then saying, you can keep that. It is, what's the worst card that they could possibly have? Then they go, thanks, I appreciate it. So that's the point of High Circus. It also has a good life burst. You get to down, freeze, draw a card, that type of thing. There is an alternative 2-drop that we'll talk about in the alternative things that you can put in there that some people like better. I'm actually in the minority that likes High Circus better than this other card. But you have options for your level 2s is all that there is to say. At level 3s, the real core of the deck here is Fenrir. You want 4 Fenrir. There's other things that you could do, like Saturn and it's Saturn Libra combo. It's bad. They're not that great. You want Fenrirs. Fenrirs are good at all points in the games. They're good attackers. They've got 12,000 power. They're good at making your opponent grind out resources because they make your opponent discard a card, and they freeze 2 things when they enter, which means that innately you are not letting the opponent attack you with these types of things. And like I said, it's better to freeze 2 than it is to freeze 1. It's imperative to freeze 2 than it is to freeze 1. Plus it combos with your Great Reversal. It is the card that you want in the deck, and your deck really can't function very well without it. The other level 3s that I have in the deck, I have Robin Hoods, and I have Quins. Quins are very good defensive green cards. Their job is to mess up combat math for 1 or 2 turns, and sometimes remove and open a lane, very rarely. If you get 2 of them, you can play them and do that. But their job is just basically just start messing up combat math. The longer they're on field, the more they mess up combat math. Then you have Robin Hood. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with Robin Hood. Genuinely, it's one of my favorite cards in the game. Robin Hood is not a good card. You should not be thinking about playing Robin Hood in a generic deck. I think this, and maybe the Nova Center in the future, are the only times you ever want to consider playing Robin Hood. Robin Hood is bad. Turns 1 through 5. Awful. The worst card you could possibly have. Enter, charge it immediately. Late game, when the opponent is only drawing 2 cards a turn, they're out of resources, so it doesn't matter what's in their enter, and you're just wiping their field and forcing them to get 1 life burst or 1 life cloth a turn. It's outstanding. It really is only good at closing a game. Every other part of the game, it's bad. So bear that in mind. That's why it's a 2 of. It's literally statistically a 2 of, so that way I get it turn 6 and on. And if I get it earlier, I just enter charge it immediately. The deck also runs for Random Drain. Random Drain is probably the most powerful spell in the Wixoss format. Probably will be the most powerful spell for a long time. It's a cantrip. You play it, it draws you a card, it makes the opponent discard a card for you at random. Forcing the opponent to lose any form of resource for more or less free is insanely powerful. I've had games where I've chained 2 of these together and it's like wrecked my opponent's game plan. I've had games where I've chained 3 and the opponent has conceded on the spot because of it. It is incredible. It's Life Burst, also good. Life Burst does down target signet on your opponent's field, freeze it. Your opponent discards a card. Trust me, if I could have more versions of my opponent discards a card instead of me drawing a card, I would adore it. So, I also forgot 1 level 3. Excuse me. Archwain. Archwain is just a wall. That's all it is. You pay and enter, it replaces itself, so you don't care when it dies, and it's just a wall. I actually very rarely pay the enter because I usually have so many cards in hand by the end of this that it does not matter. But it's a wall, and it will do its job. Innately, that's the deck in a whole nutshell. You want to play your early turns carefully. You're going to want to enter deprive. You're going to need to recognize that you're the slowest deck. My rule of thumb for enter starving is if I'm the faster deck, I don't care about enter starving. If I'm the slower deck, I try to enter starve. This is the slowest deck. You are going to try to enter starve with this deck. You want to try to enter starve at the beginning turns. You want to try to put down awkward walls, making your opponent overextend in order to try to deal with what you're putting out. And then you're going to get control of the game. And as soon as you get control of the game, you are attacking. You are trying to end the game now. You are being aggressive because you don't have time to durdle anymore. The good thing is, inevitably, all your games will end up in a situation where the opponent has no cards in hand. They draw 2 cards. They play 2 cards. That means there's a lane open, so you're attacking through that open lane. Sort of where you want to go to literally every game. Let's talk about the future of this. Oh, actually, before we talk about the future, we should talk about other cards that you can add to this deck. Now, I'm going to start with this one, and forgive me because I need to pull it out of my pile here. But it's called Folklore Azure Evil. It's a level 2 Signy. It has 10,000 power. It does nothing other than have a life burst that downs 2 of your opponent's Signy and then lets you draw a card. A vast majority of the people, especially in Japan, think that this card is better than High Circus. In some scenarios, it is better than High Circus. The fact that you can down 2 of your opponent's Signy, so if they field clear, for example, and then they attack and hit this life burst, lets you down 2 of the opponent's Signy and basically ends their attack phase right then and there. It is very good in that. However, it is also high risk, high reward, because it could be the last life burst that hits. You might get hit this with your with the opponent's center, in which case it did nothing. It drew you a card. I don't like it. I would rather have the ability to freeze because that has a little bit of a longer term effect in my opinion. But you could make an argument as to why that card would be better. The other card that you can talk about that's a level 2 that might be worth mentioning is, I think it's called Screw Carmilla. Let me swap to it. Actually, Coyotes. Coyotes is a freeze opponent's Signy when it enters, and then you can, its life burst is, it's a level 2. Down target Signy on your opponent's field and then freeze it, and then you get to draw a card. The very basic, life burst effect. I think that card's okay. Screw Carmilla is a little bit better. Freeze target Signy on your opponent's field, put the top 2 cards of your deck into your trash, and it has no life burst. It's also a demon. Right now, I don't think the demon synergies are the way to go in this deck, although they do exist, and I will point out a couple good ones. All of the good demons, generally speaking, weirdly enough, are in white, blue, and green. There's a lot in black, but they're not particularly amazing. So your demon synergies really do shine in this deck. Later down the line, it'll be in the Nova Center, by the way. There's a little spoiler for you, but it's an option. You also have a Shark Spear. Other than having one of the funniest names in Wixoss, it also has a relative effect of being able to basically get a demon out of your trash and into your hand. You're going to be basically using that to recycle Fenrir's. Outside of that, you've got really not much left in the level in your blue choices here. I've used Gigglebines. That's the one that, if it's up against a frozen thing, can get Assassin. I've used it to some extent in the deck, but it's not that great. If we're going to talk about the last blue card I want to talk about, it's Trouble. I think Trouble is a fine one of. I wouldn't use more than that. If you're finding that your meta consists of mostly, like, what are they called? Mostly diagrams and other Uchus, then I think adding a Trouble into your deck will be perfectly fine. Drawing cards against those decks will probably win you the game. But they will probably lose you the game if you're up against a card jockey deck or a no limit deck, aka if it's more aggressive. When you lean more into white, you can get stuff like Hanel, Blessed Angel. Again, that's another way to wall, although it's not my favorite way to wall in this deck. It is an option, something that you might consider putting in there. You've got Andreas, Blessed Evil. It's a demon that lets you discard a card, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and then put 1 demon into your hand. It also has a life burst of target Signy on your opponent's field gets constant. The Signy can't attack, you draw a card. Basically the equivalent of downing it and drawing a card. Blessed Evil seems like a weird card to include until you're like, oh, I really want to hit Fenrir every game. And then it becomes a great card to include because it hits Fenrir every game. The other one is Kusan, Blessed Evil. During your turn, whenever one of your cards is put into from the deck to the trash by your effect, all the Signy on your opponent's field lose their abilities till end of turn. It's less good right now, but there's going to be more demons that will be existing in the future if we cross that sacrifice stuff. I think Slime, for example, in blue does that right now. With this effect on top of that, you can make your opponents lose their effects and then kind of wreck them because of it. Sometimes it's going to be good. It's going to be more good in the future, I think, than not. And then we're going to talk about a level 3 white Signy here. That's going to be Chandelier. I actually like Chandelier a lot in this deck. I don't use it because I like Argwayne just a hair better. But Chandelier, the cost of your opponent's spells is increased by 1. As long as there's a spell in your trash, which there usually is because you've got so much draw power and you're so likely to use the random drain. That it gets plus 3,000, and again, 13,000 is a huge wall that very few things do. And when it vanishes a Signy, it trashes it instead of puts it into the ender zone. It's basically everything that you could possibly want. Then you've got the ability on its life burst to add 2 Signies to your hand, or sorry, 1 Signy to your hand and 1 spell to your hand from the trash, which lets you recycle ways to just basically, like, I would use Stand Up if I was gonna be going in more of a spells-based route, which this deck absolutely can go to. Stand Up allows you to get a guard from your trash to your hand, and I would just constantly be recycling guards with that effect if humanly possible. That brings me to my next point. You can do a tempo-based strat, whereas instead of focusing on controlling the opponent's resource, you're kind of just opening up a window to attack with it. If you're going to do that, I would use a little bit more spells, probably some stand-ups, maybe some good digs, and I would use Code Art Chandeliers, and I would use Supernova. I think that's a viable strategy. I don't think it's as good as the resource grind strategy right now, but if you wanted to lean more in that direction, I wouldn't besmudge you for it. How does this deck fare in the future of the meta? We have Japanese deck lists to look at. The truth is, it's actually not super great right now. In 0-1, it has some weaknesses. It can't really do well. It still can lose against aggro, even when you're teching against it. You can be a really good player and play against other people and do well with this deck. I have found that to be overwhelmingly true. But you need to recognize that this is not the same kind of control deck that you're used to. It's a much different control deck than most card games have. If you're a good player, I think this is a great deck. If you're struggling, it might not be the deck for you. It gets significantly better when more freeze interactions come out in 0-2, and then much significantly better when Nova white shenanigans can also be added to the deck in set 3 onwards. I would say that it's a double-edged sword, though, because as more decks get introduced into the meta, it's harder as a control deck to sort of meta game against everything. As that happens, you need to start recognizing what's specifically in my meta, what specifically gives me problems, what do I have to tech against, what can I let go and accept the fact that I might have a little bit more of a bad matchup against that deck. If you do that, the deck will stay good, probably all the way up until set 4. Set 4 is when Dominus Machina shows up, and it gives this deck a pretty hard time. That is not to say that this deck, I'm talking about Tamago. It's not to say that Nova is not a good deck at that point. Nova at set 3 becomes a pretty okay deck to do, probably slightly worse than Tamago or maybe around the same level. But when Devil's Carnival comes out and makes this demon deck really viable and really tick, it's very good against the Dominus Machina stuff for a little while, and still remains pretty good to this day. Nova ends up being a tier 1.5 deck, and you don't have to do a ton of shifting to make Nova good. The stuff that's good right now in Tamago is also good in Nova. You just shift a little bit more focus towards white and a little bit less off of blue, but it stays relatively the same. So it's something that you could grow into. I would suggest this deck has a pretty good shelf life on it, but I would state that you would need to be prepared to shift from meta to meta, and it's not a great deck to take, for example, to one store and then go to a completely different store and hope it'll work right. You need to really analyze what's going on in those stores. So that's pretty much everything that you need to know about specifically Dr. Tamago with the Uchu no Hajimari deck. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions below, I'd love to talk about this deck more. And may you guys always flip a life burst. Flip a life burst. Flip a life burst. Flip a life burst.